This is another topic that I had a request about, so I'll go through it, and it'll take however much time that it takes. I think we can use the information here to solve a problem I was having last time. So I will go over the example that I have for class. Then we'll revisit the problem that I was experiencing last time. And then we'll look to see how I can solve it. Or how we can solve it. We'll try to solve it together. Spoiler alert, I already have a solution for it. But I actually struggled getting a solution for this. And the approach I was taking wasn't really working. And I'm not 100% sure why. But when I was investigating this topic, a different way came into mind, and that way did work. The topic we're going to talk about is the application life cycle. And the application life cycle is sort of the events that get called throughout the life of an application. So, for example, with an Android application, we can do a lot of things. We can let me start up one of these, because I have a couple of them open. We can start up our application. Alright, we can start up our application. We can do things like go and hide that application and go do something else. So we can open up Chrome. And go and do something on our Android device. Then we can come back to our application. There's a series of events that happen as we go through that process. Okay? And it's important to understand what those events are, because that'll help us do some things, do some code. And it's a thing that we had talked about in class, but sort of not very directly. We sort of skirted around. We said, oh, the onCreate, well, that happens when an application is created. Like, you couldn't have figured that out from the name of it. So I posted a resource to Canvas, and that resource comes with a little application that you can play with and see sort of exactly what events get called. So this is the application. Application Lifecycle. And it shows the events that exist. There's an onCreate, an onStart, which again, some of these, the names are a little slightly misleading, like what's the difference between onCreate and onStart? But there is actually a difference. It's called when an activity is first created versus called when an activity first becomes visible to a user. Because you can create an activity and there could be a period of time where it's not quite visible yet. Called when the activity will start interacting with the user. So that's onResume. OnPause is called when the activity is not visible to the user. Versus called when activity is no longer visible to the user. Then called after your activity is stopped prior to start, so that's an onRestart. And then finally called when activity is destroyed. And they have a little flow chart for this. So, activity is launched. All right? So that'll call the onCreate, the onStart, and onResume in rapid fire. And then you got your activity coming. All right? Now another activity comes to the foreground. So for example, I go and I click on Google Chrome. That is going to fire off the onPause method. Okay? When I refire up the activity, it's going to call up the onResume method.
So for example, of an application with a settings activity, like when you go into the settings, the main activity will be on pause.
Yep.
And then the settings activity will go through the onCreate, onStart, and onResume.
Yes.
And then once you go back to the main activity, it'll do onResume.
Yep.
What happens to the settings activity?
It's presumably dead. You've
So it'll be
exited. Undestroyed.
Undestroyed, okay.
Yeah. All right. When the activity is no longer visible, activities stop. When it's killed, then when its activity is finishing or is destroyed by the system on destroy. All right. This is interesting to see, but I really think what was useful to me in understanding this, and I have to confess that parts of this was a little fuzzy, again, simply by the terminology being a little bit confusing, that this activity was very illustrative. Because all this does is this runs different, this has in each event simply logging something that happened. So, for example, when I run this, it will write to the logcat Lifecycle and then onCreate, Lifecycle onStart, Lifecycle onResume. So this is almost like a trace of the user events that go through. And let's see if we can search.
For debugging purposes.
It absolutely is. And let's search for Lifecycle. So let's just look for Lifecycle in here, and can we clear it? Yes, we can. So we're clearing it and we're focusing on Lifecycle, so we won't see any of these other messages because a lot of messages go to this. So we're going to go and start this guy up on my device. So I'm in the process of doing that. Alright, there's the application which simply has a hello world. And if we look at this, we will see that some of these other error messages come I'll put Lifecycle : so we only see those messages because Lifecycle is the app name as well. What happened? We got just as the chart implied. We got onCreate, onStart, and onResume.
And those timestamps are really close to each other.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're not talking about like minutes between them or even seconds. We're talking about fractions of a second. You know, this is 6/1000ths of a second. This is 2/1000ths of a second difference. Okay, so those events fired off in that order. Oh, I've never gotten the hang of two monitors. Okay, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to do something else. I have to do a Google search, let's say. So I go, close out of this, go to Chrome. If I look at this, I will see in the trace that on pause and on stop occur. All right? Pardon me? rapid fire again. All right. So on pause and then on stop are fired off. All right. So we go back to our emulator and we finish this. We look and find our application and go back to it, and we get on restart evoked, on start evoked, and on resume evoked. All right? So that's showing you the events that get fired off. And if you look very closely, it conforms to exactly what it's saying here. All right? I found, I'm not sure if it's the exact thing you mentioned, Jeff had mentioned him finding a resource that had this in it when he made the suggestion that we review the life cycle. And so I found this resource that if it's not the same one, it looks like the same one that you described. So I thought that was a great idea. So we're going this over. And we're going to try to go and solve the problem that we had last time with the sequel one of having to create another intent to fire off, which seems like overkill. All right. So we notice again, when it starts, we get on create, on start, and on resume. When we minimized it more or less, when we went and clicked on the, I suppose you call it the home button, that calls the on pause. Whoops. Oh, I don't know what it's doing, but when we click that button, it goes and it does the on pause and on stop method. I'm going to minimize some of these because they're getting in my way. So on pause and on stop. When I go back to it, if I use the back arrow, I get on stop, on destroy. So we're seeing all these different things, and this sort of shows us the events that get fired and so on. All right? Any questions about this?
What would you do in each of the life cycle methods?
Well, again, knowing when they fire off allows you to answer that question because it really depends on the application. So let's consider the thing I had a problem with last time. All right? And that was this guy here. The thing I had a problem with is, if you remember, my list activity started a new activity for modify. So we call the modify activity. That goes and does its thing. When it finishes, all right, when it finishes, it calls return home, which starts a new intent and calls the home, the list back up, the going home event, intent. So it brings up that list again. And that seemed like that was a little bit resource intensive. It seems to be like we could have just told this activity to die, all right? And then the other activity should be there, all right? So that's what I tried to do. And essentially what I did was this. I changed the return home to say And let's review how this worked, just to refresh our memory. I could go and run it, this application. It shows me the country and the currency.
Can't really see that.
Maybe. All right, there we go, USA in dollars. I click on it, I go into it. Maybe I'll change it to a dollar sign instead of an S. And I click update, and there it started another activity and brought it up.
Why does it hit the back button?
If I go here and hit the back button, it dies. Maybe it just goes to that intent. Maybe I'm mistaken about that. But what I did, my first move was to do this, to call the finish method on this. Which kind of worked, but kind of didn't. All right? Let's see if we can understand why it didn't work in refreshing it. And nothing else I did using this, nothing else that I tried that was an extension of what I did last time really solved the problem. It's only when I looked at it from this perspective of the activity life cycle that I sort of figured out what to do. So now I can do this. I can click on that to edit it. I'll change that back to an S. But when I click my update, it might be a little hard to see, but it doesn't make the change isn't reflected in that. Okay, now I can go out of this and go into it again, and the change will be reflected. So it's making the change to the database. It's just that my list isn't refreshing and showing the new values here. So if I look at that, it made the change in the database. That what used to be a dollar sign is now the letter S again. So let's look at that list and see if what we know now based on the item life cycle, if we can make some suggestions of code to move and things like that. So here is the country list. And I'll try to include as much of the code as I can. There's the onCreate method. Does all this stuff. There's to create the menu. There's for the options selected, and that's it. So why am I having problems of this, when I come back to this activity, not refreshing? And what can I do to make it refresh?
Nothing. It's just, is it because that nothing's telling it to refresh?
Well, there's no code that tells it that's telling it to refresh. There's code in the onCreate that tells it to refresh.
But not in the onResume method. You have to do an onRestart maybe?
Okay, those are all good thoughts. We could experiment with this. Let's look at our chart, and let's see if our chart can help us figure this out.
There's a loop somewhere. Yeah, I'd say it would just the main activity would just go on pause since it's still visible. It's just that something's on top. It's on top of it. So I address the activity. It'll just.
What's the value that you're losing?
Repeat that, please.
You're losing a value somewhere?
I'm not losing a value anywhere. Where is the code now to do the retrieval of the cursor? Is in onCreate, which means when the activity is launched the first time, it does that. That's why he has to launch the activity again from that other activity. So when the list activity calls the modify activity, in order for this to refresh, he has to create a new activity so the onCreate gets called again. All right? I'm suggesting that we can put the code somewhere else And we don't have to create a new activity. We can just go back to this activity.
When you went to the second window, where were we on this hierarchy? Were we on pause or on?
I'd say on pause. It's still the previous activity is still visible.
Still running in memory.
Yeah, it's still running. It's still there.
Yeah, it's just that little pop-up goes into the foreground, which precisely describes the.
So according to that list, then we need to kick off on resume.
All right.
Well, whether on pause or on stop is called. When you go back to the main activity, on resume would still be fired anyway.
Okay. So are you agreeing with them, or are you making another point?
I'm making another point. Like even
Okay.
if on stop is called,
Right.
like once you restart or go back to the activity,
Okay.
it'll go through the on restart method, on start, and on resume. So either way, it'll just go back to on resume.
So you're saying you want it in the on resume.
Yes.
So okay, so you're agreeing with them. You're just bringing out another point about that.
Right.
I just want to make sure we're that. Does that make sense to everyone? That we try slapping this code in the on resume?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that we could just sort of put it everywhere, sort of, and tag it and see where it actually gets, where it works, right? I mean, I'm not against trying one at a time, right?
Okay.
But eventually, you should be able to figure it out, right?
Right.
There's only so many callbacks, so.
Right, exactly. Well, I would go, we could try it in several places. I'm going to try to fast forward to the end of this one. And you're absolutely right.
Activity,
If you
on
look,
resume would fire.
if you look, right before activity's running, that on resume thing gets hit.
So it will always fire.
If it's created the first time, if it's restarting, or if it was just pause. You're hitting that. So I'm going to try putting the code there. And much like a chef who has a completed turkey in the oven, so he doesn't have to do everything, I have a version of this app where I did just that. And
I think this is cooking shows on TV.
exactly. So when I'm done here, I just call finish. All right? I don't create a new activity. I could get rid of this altogether.
Get rid of the entire method.
Yeah, could get rid of the method and whatever. All right, but I just finish. All right, let's see. I want to, I should be able to do this. I should be able to change delete too, and that should work the same way. Finish.
Zero sums like doing the same thing.
Yeah, because it should be doing the same thing. All right. So, in fact, I can get rid of the method, as you said.
Yeah.
So, and then in my list activity, I took everything about the cursor and put it in here. So essentially, on resume, I go in and I redo the adapter. Now, could we do this even slicker than this? Could we even have less code in here? That's sort of why I ran out of time before today's lecture. All right, but I did find that this does it, and this will fix the issue I had. So if I go in here and run this, go in here and change this to United States dollars and update, I'll be darned. Let me try this again.
Is the correct version you're running, right?
I hope so.
Hold on. Is that cursor code in the on read or on resume?
to. That's on, yeah, this one should be,
Is this the one that's on resume?
yeah, I think I did this. Let's see. I delete and list. Yeah, there's on the on resume. So
Run that instead.
thank you. There we go. Here we go and change this to USD and update. I swear this was working.
Try just launching it from the window.
Can I just have a minute to
Oh.
debug this, please?
Sure,
Thanks.
sure.
It's on resume. There we go. There we go. It was weird. I don't know what was going on with that. Did I do anything in this other activity? Yeah. This is the one that, yeah, this should be, this is the one it was running. It was running a copy of it. Could be confusing it because these two activities have the same names. So,
Unless you're not sure what that the top toolbar which one is which
right,
instance is
yeah,
referring to.
yeah, that would have been a smart thing to do, to go in and, there we go. To go in and change the name. But the bottom line about this is understanding the activity life cycle is important, and the problem with this in a nutshell was that it was on the create, and therefore the create only fires up once. Therefore, we had to restart the activity, and that is what called the onCreate again, and we don't really need to do that. We could probably make it less resource intensive to simply go back to the other activity and use that code on resume, and that will make it. Now, again, like I said, you certainly probably could move some of that code elsewhere and maybe split and put some of the code in the onCreate and some of the code in the onResume. Let me just close this one all together. Like here, like this you could put.
I think you closed the wrong one. It says SQLite copy at the top.
Yeah, I think I did too, because that's on onCreate. That's what happens when you have two applications named the same thing. Lifecycle. anyhow, we could probably put some of the code that's in the onResume in the onCreate, like grabbing these pointers. Maybe even setting the onClick listener. Maybe even setting the adapter. But we could probably retrieve the cursor and notify it that the data has changed. If I was going to do this some more, I would let's see if I can get this to work. I'll put some of it back in onCreate. Could try something like this, which I am not sure if it would work or not. But all I could do is retrieve the data and tell the adapter that it has changed. I'm concerned about that, though, because I'm guessing this is going to return a new cursor object, and the adapter is going to be stuck on the old cursor object. I'm going to try running it just for the heck of it, but I'm not confident that this will work. No, it didn't. Probably because this actually creates a new object, and that cursor adapter was created with our old cursor object. So I messed up my one working copy, so that's okay. Resume. So I don't think that worked because it creates a different cursor each time, different cursor object, and my adapter is already made with that one. So let's.
Is cursor, that's just a local.
Yeah, it's just a local variable, but it won't disappear because the adapter has a pointer to it. So it's not going to get garbage collected because the adapter still has it. But then I'm thinking that you create the adapter with the cursor that got created the first time. If I call that statement to fetch the cursor again, I'm getting a new cursor object. So the adapter is using the old cursor. I'm retrieving and I'm creating a new cursor. So if I say the data is changed in a new cursor, not the old cursor.
What if you made the cursor, gave it object scope and then check for null first before you it turn null if, it would have to turn off when out of scope.
Yeah. Well, when it went out of scope, remember that the cursor still has a pointer to it, so it doesn't get garbage collected.
Well, then it wouldn't be null. Then.
Right, it wouldn't be null.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. So we achieved essentially what I was shooting for, and that is not having to start a new intent and stopping it. So we'll call that a day. Next week we have 2 classes. Are there other topics that you gave me a good list of things? I can pick items off of that. I went for the Lifecycle today. Are there any other things off that list that you want me to work on or to talk about?
Well, I've read about the services, but I thought that was pretty interesting. If you want to go over that next
Okay.
week, it's fairly straightforward.
So services with regard to,
Well, I just saw some examples. I mean, they were pretty. The one I saw was pretty interesting. How to create a service, and
Okay.
it was fairly easy.
okay. Well, I'll take a look at that then, unless anyone else has something else to go over.
The stuff I did is new to us. Not
Okay.
in the meeting one, but if you wanted, I could show what I did.
Okay, we can do that either Tuesday or Thursday. I kind of want Thursday to be a show and tell
Yeah.
of people to show what they've worked on.